Joining me now is Reggie Hubbard. He's the congressional liaison and DC strategist for Move On. They recently did a campaign to close the camps. 175 protests across the country. That is amazing. So Reggie, welcome to the show. I want to know how you guys did it.
So one of the beautiful things is that we have a beat on the pulse of the grassroots. You know, we're in touch with millions of members on a regular basis and a subset of those members on a daily basis. And so when we put the call out on the 27th of July saying we need to stand up, the people heeded the call and we came out in force, 175 events in over 40 places, essentially laying the blame at the feet of Congress, being like, we're not helpless here. You can help us with this by doing your job and closing these camps.
Okay, there's so many things to dissect there. First of all, when you talk about Congress, Pelosi seems to have given, and to be fair to Pelosi, Schumer even more so, a blank check to Trump on these detention centers. And when the 4 Justice Democrats criticized them on it, they took it very, very personally. Right. So what's your take on that? Because a lot of groups in Washington think that you should have an inside game and not criticize Democratic leadership. You guys seem to have done the opposite here.
We have a strategy basically where we're calling on Congress to defund hate. So defund ICE, defund CBP, and hold them accountable for what they're doing. We choose not to take our arguments all the way out in the press. We take them behind closed doors. But we stand firm with our colleagues that do call people out in the front.
All right, well that's good to hear. So and if you guys don't know, Move On is the largest progressive organization out there based on mailing lists, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important when Move On weighs in on something. Now let's talk about logistics. I know it's kind of a funny thing to ask about and to get excited about, but how did you guys get protests in 175 different locations?
Well, in full disclosure, I'm a former advance man, so logistics, I could talk about that all day. And I actually met you in 2016 at one of Bernie's senior producers, so logistics are my mainstay. Mm-hmm. So we basically, we just put the word out, and about a year ago, almost a year ago to the day, we had Families Belong Together protests nationwide. About 750 and marches in the streets in Washington, D.C. when we first learned about the atrocities of the family detention crisis. And basically, because we have these relationships with United We Dream, with Families Belong Together, with the American Friends Committee, we just call on them and we're just like, okay, look, so it's time to stand up and do something, right? And luckily, because we are in touch with our members, in coalition, consistently, we're able to pull the trigger and make these things happen with almost a moment's notice. Let's
talk about those coalitions because, look, I'm gonna keep it real. In my experience, it is hard to put progressive coalitions together. Some people are worried about upsetting politicians. Some people have another agenda. Some people don't want to do this or that. So you guys got what, over 50 different groups to sponsor this?
Yes.
And so how'd you do that?
We work consistently with people throughout the year, right? So like our coalition work is meeting by meeting, day by day. So it's not like, hey, we're doing something and we haven't been in touch with people. So we've been in coalition with people for years in some cases. So when the call comes, we're already on the same page. So it's not about having to herd cats. Like the cats, I heard you mention that you were going to talk about cats, so I couldn't resist that analogy. So the cats are already in line, so we can just bring them together and have them march in line.
That's the hard work that goes into organizing that a lot of people don't see. And then that has the results that it did. So you did the protests. We covered it, and it looked like a lot of other press covered it, including local news, which can sometimes have a bigger impact than people realize. Were you satisfied with the amount of attention that it got?
So we got about over 1,500 local news clips, which if anyone who knows about that, sometimes hearing the story in the local media, because it's repeated over and over again, has a better effect than it being on national media. So 1,500 clips with a 6-day lead time. In local media across the nation, that's amazing. And I think that translates into over $8 million in earned media based on simply our members coming together in coalition to stand up against these atrocities. So we're very pleased by that.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about what's next, because unfortunately the Democrats did give them a blank check. So what do we do next?
We continue to keep the pressure on members of Congress. So for those people who say that we can't do anything, we're telling members of Congress, go to a camp. If they don't let you in, so what? Show up and bear witness to the situation. I was in Homestead a couple weeks ago and saw from my own eyes in Homestead children in lines with orange hats that are separated from their families. So once you see it, you can't unsee it. If grassroots activists can do it, members of Congress can go and bear witness to what's going on. So if you haven't seen it, we're calling on members of Congress to go see it. We're happy that members of the Senate last week went to go see camps in a Codell. Not every member of Congress has done that, and if you haven't, we're calling on you to do it.
You know, I remember, I think in the beginning of LeBron's career, people had those shirts that said, "I am witness."
Yeah.
And so let's witness this. And obviously more important. And look, I think this issue is so important, but that activism overall and showing up to make a difference is even more important. And
absolutely.
And so I want to stay on this for one more minute here, and then I want to talk about what else we could do this for, right? But I know that there's places that people can donate that can make a difference in helping these folks. Is there one in particular that you guys are directing people towards?
We direct people towards Families Belong Together, towards United We Dream. And local areas have their own immigrant rights groups. I'm not familiar as conversant on the local areas, but I know Families Belong Together is doing a lot of good work nationally, and they are putting people in touch with local organizations as well.
And guys, we're putting up the petition there, and we'll give you a full screen on it too. And MoveOn's got a petition on this. And the reason I tell you guys to sign our petitions and other progressive petitions is because the more people that sign it, the more power that it has, and the more politicians pay attention to it. So we'll have the link down below if you're watching later on YouTube and Facebook, so you can easily click on it. All right, Reggie, let's talk about what else we can do this with, because I think it was a spectacular success, and at least drawing attention to this issue and putting pressure on the Democrats, which you can actually affect rather than the Republicans, which are nearly immovable.
Right.
And so what other issues can we do these kind of mass protests with?
Well, I wouldn't say the Republicans are immovable. I mean, there are vulnerable Republicans in the Senate that if you show the contrast, so for instance, I'm in Denver, Colorado right now. Cory Gardner has a lot to be held accountable for, maybe not in a mass protest, but he's up for re-election this year. So, he has a lot to be accountable for in standing up or not standing up to what Trump has done. MoveOn's been very active in impeachment. We've been impressing local members who haven't come out yet to stand up for impeachment. And we've been asking our members to pressure members to show them support and say that it's okay to hold this president accountable. Immigration, we're very strong on. We're very strong on climate justice. We stand strong with the Green New Deal coalition and are in ways to advocate for a better climate future for us all. I think to your point, Cenk, it's not just one issue. Like when we all come together, especially as progressives, like there are more things that unite us and divide us, and we need to come together not only in 2019 but in 2020 to make massive change.
Reggie, at least one more thing on that. Ryan Grimm recently came out with a book, We've Got People, and it's a great history of progressivism in basically in my lifetime, and all the way up through the current. And he makes a excellent point near the end of the book about Mitch McConnell and the Republicans. That interestingly, the number one thing they're most afraid of are protests. And the reason for that is because it gives power to the people, and they want to make sure that you feel hopeless. That way a minority of the country can rule over a majority of the country by just having more money. They've got money, we've got people. So have you seen in your activism and your career, both in politics and outside of it, how much of a difference showing up in person can make?
It cannot be understated the beauty that creating community has in terms of affecting social change. For better or for worse, technology is a beautiful thing, texts and emails and those sorts of things. But there is no substitute for coming together in community, making your voice heard, not only with respect to issues, but in just saying hello. I had an opportunity a couple of weeks ago to speak to some UK progressive activists, and they were like, so how do you all stay focused? How do you all stay enlivened? I was like, we call each other. We check on each other. Like, we're actually friends. And so like creating community and a sense of wholeness and a sense of community in these issues when times are rough makes it better when we do come together make our issues heard, and stand together, that's how these things change over time. Community over time with sustained focus and energy will beat money every time. Shout out to Bernie Sanders.
That's right. And look, guys, when Sunrise and AOC went to Nancy Pelosi's office, that 85 people, 100 people, however many people that it was,
right,
changed the national conversation about the environment and what politicians can do about it. Because it might not be logical, but humans are social animals. And when they see other human beings in front of them, it makes a much larger impact than hearing that there are a million people on that side, or hearing about polling, right?
Chanting,
seeing it with
right?
and that's right, seeing it and hearing it in the chants, etc. So join up with Move On, join up with the TYT Army, and we'll all come together. And we've got people, for God's sake, let's use them.
Totally.
All right, Reggie Hubbard, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for putting together these protests. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Blessings to you.